Now fugitives from the law, Vox Machina braves many perils to make it to Whitestone in hopes of clearing their names and getting justice for the Derolos. But the Whitestone that they find is a mere shadow of its former self, one that's ruled with an iron fist by the Briarwoods. So our heroes decide to ignite the spark of rebellion, but in the process, they find out that Percy is not the only Derolo that's still alive. Everybody grab your D20s and roll initiative, because it is once again time for cartoon versus campaign. Greetings fanboys and fangirls, I'm Erod and I'm the Blockbuster Buster. Once again, I would like to remind all of you that I cannot talk about these two stories without spoiling them. So if you haven't seen The Legend of Vox Machina episodes 7 through 9, as well as their corresponding episodes of Campaign 1 of Critical Role, you might want to stop the video here. You've been warned. One of the biggest differences between these two stories, which I've failed to point out until this very moment as it is most applicable to episode 7, is that in the cartoon, the members of Vox Machina don't have as many powers, abilities, and weapons as they do in the campaign. Obviously, this was done to simplify things and make it easier for the cartoon's audience to keep up with what each character can do. Personally, I'm still glad that in spite of that, they still managed to sneak in Percy's secondary gun. Bad news. And why is it called bad news? Because nothing travels faster. Anyway, remember when they established Scanlan stealing a bunch of potions and a shape-shifting scroll from Brimside's cave in episode 5? This was done to establish all the powers and abilities that Scanlan is going to use in the first episode that I'm going to talk about today. Powers and abilities that he already had in the campaign. Also, I have to give the cartoon's writing team some major props, as this was a great example of economy of story. Whom better to get a shape-shifting scroll from than a dragon with the ability to shapeshift? Alright, now that that's established, let's begin. Scambo. Now that Stonefell has been crossed off Percy's list, Vox Machina must decide what's their next move. In the campaign, they just continue taking out the Briarwoods lieutenants, as that will weaken their ranks as well as inspire the people of Whitestone to join the rebellion. In the cartoon, they have more noble motivations behind their actions. After learning that his sister's still alive, Percy makes it his top priority to save her. Our heroes learn that she's being kept in Professor Anders' house under heavy guard. Scanlan suggests to lure the guards away by setting fire to Duke Vedmire's house. And as soon as the guards leave their post to help put out the flames, the rest of the party can make their assault on Anders unimpeded. In the campaign, it is Percy who comes up with this plan, and Scanlan volunteers to go and set the fire with zero protest from the rest of the party. Now, in the cartoon, Scanlan's one-man assault on Vedmire's house is a series of hilarious accidents that work in his favor. The only purposeful moment is when he heroically defeats Vedmire by firing a lightning bolt from his crotch, or as Sam Riegel likes to call it, cock lightning. In the campaign, the Scambo scene is a breathtaking edge-of-your-seat sequence in which Sam Riegel somehow, someway, miraculously made all the right choices. Now, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you stop the video here and go check it out, because no matter how good of a job I do of breaking it down, I will not be able to fully do it justice. Alright, first, Scanlan polymorphs into a dragonfly and flies up to Vedmire's front door unnoticed. Then, polymorphs into a Triceratops and breaks in through the front door, only to discover that it was an ambush. Vedmire was waiting for him with about a half a dozen guards. It is also important to note that while in the cartoon we had already seen Vedmire in several scenes before this point, in the campaign this is the first time we see the character, and we learn that he is a Goliath. So we have a little gnome bard taking on a Goliath and half a dozen guards alone. Scanlan takes a few hits from arrows, but he's in Triceratops form, so the damage is very minimal. He then rams his way into Vedmire's kitchen, morphs back into a gnome, and leaves a stink cloud behind, slowing down Vedmire and his men. By the time the villains make it into the kitchen, Scanlan has enough time to cast Dimension Door and teleports himself to the roof of the house, where he finds that it is raining. On the roof, he drinks a potion of fire breathing, and breathes fire over the edge of the roof onto the front of the house, setting it on fire. At this point, Vedmire emerges from a latch in the roof, ready to cut the gnome in half. So Scanlan summons Bigby's hand, and just gently pushes the Goliath off the roof. And because it's raining and the roof is slippery, he just slips right off and pathetically falls to the ground below. Scanlan then peeks his head into the hatch that Vedmire came out of and breathes fire into the interior of the house. 2 guards actually manage to make it past the flames and onto the roof. They fire some arrows at Scanlan, but by this point, Scanlan just drops off the edge of the roof, lands on Bigby's hand, and is carried to safety. I've said it before, and I'll say it a million times. This sequence is awesome. In the cartoon, while Scanlan is being a one-man army, the rest of Vox Machina faces off against Anders and rescue Cassandra. In the campaign, this doesn't happen until much later when our heroes reach the castle, and we'll talk about that when we get there. At this point in the campaign, the rest of Vox Machina make their assault on Count Tyleri's house. And who is Count Tyleri? A character that along with this scene was completely cut out from the cartoon. In fact, the only part of the assault on Tyleri's that made it into the cartoon is how Grog bursts into the house first, only to find an ambush. And he takes a buttload of damage. But it's no big deal because he can take it as he is raging.
I would like to...
A silver tongue.
The only truly memorable part of the assault on Count Tyleri's house is that Trinket is the one that finishes off Tyleri by clamping his jaw around his skull and ripping his head clean off. The rest of the sequence is just Vox Machina kicking ass. In fact, they kick so much ass that at one point the guards have no choice but to run away. They don't make it too far, but Vox Machina actually keeps one guard alive for questioning. He doesn't actually tell them anything they don't already know, but inadvertently confesses to helping hang the people from the sun tree that were used as effigies of Vox Machina, including the child that was used to create the effigy of Scanlan. Vax doesn't take this very well. He immediately takes out one of his daggers and slits the guy's throat. In the cartoon, it is Vedmire who makes this confession.
More jokes. I strung children's corpses from a tree.
And then later pays dearly for it. But we'll talk more about that when we get there. Just like they did at Stonefeld's house, our heroes set the house on fire. Then Keyleth creates the Dorolo crest in the sky via skywriting. Then they run back to the alcove where they reunite with Scanlan. They take a short rest and then take back to the streets where they find that the citizens of Whitestone are fighting the Briarwood's forces. They fight and make their way all the way to the Sun Tree where they realize that they are suddenly surrounded by an army of the Undead. In the cartoon, we actually get to see Delilah summon the army of the Undead. Scanlan is the first one to spot the zombies and then runs and warns the others only to find themselves surrounded.
Holy shit!
We may want to get out of here.
The tide of bone.
After a bit of running, hiding, and inappropriate professions of true love,
What? Now? I mean, this is like the worst time!
our heroes find themselves surrounded at the Sun Tree, where Percy makes an inspirational speech and they try to make their last stand, until Pike makes the save, with the most epic entrance ever. Which, by the way, is a reference to Lilith from Borderlands 3, and not Thor from Avengers Infinity War. But I can see where there might be some confusion.
Sup?
In the campaign, however, our heroes actually fight the zombies as best as they can and make it down a nearby street, where Keyleth creates a wall of stone, and here is where our heroes intend to make their final stand. It is at this point that Keeper Yennon runs up with a bunch of Whitestone citizens intending to help Vox Machina fight off the zombies, and they just so happen to bring Pike with them. Yeah, I know that's a very underwhelming entrance, especially when you compare it to the cartoon, but she does go on to kick a whole mess of ass all the same. One of the top questions I get asked about Vox Machina is why Pike is so overpowered during this scene. Well, there's 2 reasons for this. Number 1, she's channeling her astral self from a temple of Sarenrae, which amplifies her divine power, kind of like holding a magnifying glass next to a bright light. And the second reason for the effectiveness of her powers is that she is primarily fighting unholy creatures like zombies and vampires, who are all vulnerable to her power. It's the equivalent of Hydra Man fighting the Human Torch in the middle of the ocean. There is just no way, son. In the cartoon, Scanlan is bitten by a zombie and is immediately healed by Pike when she reappears. This moment does not exist in the campaign. I believe it was done in the cartoon to re-establish Pike's role within the party. Just a quick refresher for the audience since Pike was gone for so long. Then our favorite petite cleric explains that she's not really there. Her body's still at the Temple of Sarenrae and she's astral projecting.
Your ass what?
Which is a sly reference in both versions of the story to the fact that Ashley Johnson wasn't physically there when they filmed this particular session of the game. She had to participate via Skype because she was still filming Blind Spot in New York. Now, in the cartoon, Percy wounds Vedmire during this portion of the battle, leaving him at the mercy of the citizens of Whitestone. In the campaign, we don't see him again until the very end of the arc, and we'll talk about that when we get there. While in the cartoon our heroes immediately head to the castle after Pike blesses all the citizens' weapons, in the campaign our heroes actually stick around just a little bit longer and help the citizens fight off a few giants and then instruct them to attack the castle in the morning. In the cartoon, Keeper Yennon tells them that she'll take care of that, and our heroes just take off. In the campaign, our heroes then go look for the secret entrance to the castle that they learned about from Lord Vok. They don't actually know where it is, so it takes them a good 10 minutes to find it. In the cartoon, the secret entrance is well known to the Dorolo children, as Percy and Cassandra used to use it to sneak out of the castle when they were kids, so the party finds it and goes right in without impediment. In the campaign, our heroes take advantage of the fact that they have a safe place to hide for a few hours, so they take a long rest. Then Pike uses her power to create a hero's feast, so our heroes will be at full power when they face the Briarwoods. Pike takes a moment to bless Percy, which momentarily frees him from Orthak's influence. The party then moves into the dungeon, where they find a mysterious old lady in one of the cells. While they argue what to do with this old lady, Vex distracts her by pretending to pick the lock of her cell. The old lady, desperate to get out of the cell, runs up and tries to help Vex do this, and when she does so, Vex can feel that one of her hands is missing. She goes back to the party and gives them this information. Keyleth casts Dispel Magic and reveals that the old lady is actually Dr. Anna Ripley in disguise, the next person on Percy's list. Then, Percy calmly and logically negotiates with Ripley as to whether or not they should let her out of her cell. This is not what happens in the cartoon, where Pike never got a chance to bless Percy. So the moment the gunslinger sees Ripley, he draws his gun and tries to shoot her in the head. And that's where the cartoon hits the big to be continued, and we end this session of cartoon versus campaign. Join us next time when we conclude this video series with episodes 10 through 12. See you then.